Welcome. In this course, I will speak about Mongolic languages, or the Mongolian language family, if you will. First, I want to speak about the language versus dialect problem. Then I will speak about the possibilities of classification of the Mongolic languages. How do we classify, how do we group these, how do we put these languages into different groups, or languages or varieties. I like to use this neutral term, varieties. I prefer using this to using the term languages or dialects, so I will use the term variety a lot during this course. And then we will look at each member of this language family, and I will speak about the main characteristics, the most characteristic features, linguistic features of these members. We will speak about phonetics, morphology, vocabulary, and we will be listening to some audio recordings, audio samples, or watch some videos that are in the given language or the given variety. And I will stop these video recordings at certain points, and I will point out the most salient features of these varieties. And we will be reading some texts as well. We will acquaint ourselves with the writing systems of those members of the Mongolian language family that have their own writing systems. And unfortunately, or maybe not unfortunately, we have some members, we have some Mongolic varieties that are spoken in different areas, in China or in Russia or even in Mongolia, but they do not have their own writing systems. Okay, this is also an interesting question. Okay, first, language versus dialect. Okay, what is this problem? How do we differentiate a language from a dialect? This is a tough question, and first of all, this is not a linguistic question, so therefore I don't want to speak too much about this, because this is really not a scholarly question, not a linguistic question, but I think this is a political question. Because we often associate languages with countries, one country, one language, but this way of thinking is not accurate, because in many countries there are a number of languages spoken, and we often think that a language is a form of speech, is a variety that can be attached to an independent country. And many people, if asked about the difference between a language and a dialect, many people would say this is a popular opinion that if you take, for example, two people who speak different forms of speech, and if they can understand each other, then they speak two different dialects of a language. They speak the same language, but different dialects of the same language. And if they cannot understand each other, then they speak different languages. This is mutual intelligibility, the factor of mutual intelligibility. Many people think or say that mutual intelligibility must be the rule of thumb when we make a difference between languages and dialects, but also mutual intelligibility is not a good factor. Mutual intelligibility is not a good rule of thumb because of many reasons. This is not as simple as it seems for the first sight, because, for example, if you take two individuals from different spoken varieties, they might understand each other quite well. And if you again take two different individuals from these two same groups, speakers of the same different varieties, they might not understand each other as well as the previous two individuals did. Why? Because, for example, the level of education is also an important factor. The mood of the individual, the current mood of the individual, of the individuals, the willingness to understand the other person, or the different attitudes of these people, of these individuals, is a really important factor. So you cannot say that, well, if they understand each other, they speak the same languages, different dialects of the same language, and if they do not understand each other, they speak the two different languages. And there is also a degree of understanding. It also depends on about what they speak, the topic of the speech. They might understand each other if they speak about a topic in which they are both interested in. Okay, the topic of the speech is also really important. But if they speak about, for example, if two men who both like cars and they speak about cars, each using their own variety, their own, let's say, dialect, then they might understand each other much better than, for example, if they spoke about flowers or kitchen utensils, then that would be much more difficult for them, or completely different topics. It would be much more difficult for them to understand each other. Okay, so mutual intelligibility is not a rule of thumb in distinguishing between languages and dialects. And for example, if we look at Europe, then let's take, for example, Norwegian and Swedish. Norwegian and Swedish people understand each other quite well, so the mutual intelligibility is quite high between Norwegian and Swedish, but nobody would say in Europe that Norwegian and Swedish are two different dialects of one language. Okay, everybody acknowledges that they are different languages. While in China, for example, varieties that are really mutually really not intelligible, the speakers of which really do not understand each other a single word, they don't understand a single word from each other's speech, are treated as dialects in China. For example, Cantonese is often referred to as a Chinese dialect, but Cantonese and Mandarin speakers, they don't understand each other at all. Okay, so I say this is a political question. One person once said, I don't remember the name of this person, or maybe I will look it up, once said that a language is a form of speech which has an army and a navy, and a form of speech that does not have an army and a navy is a dialect. Okay, so this is a political question, not a linguistic question. For me, as somebody who's interested in linguistics and languages, and I'm not a politician, and I don't want to make political decisions about languages. For me, only different form of speech, varieties, again, varieties, the good term, I think, the neutral term, varieties exist, and some varieties are quite close to each other, some are quite distant to each other, some are related somehow, some are not related. For example, Russian and Mongolian are not related forms of speech, but for example Kalmyk and Buryat are related but quite distant from each other. Okay, so there are different forms of speech, and this is interesting, this is fascinating, and during this course I would like to speak about these different forms of varieties. Okay. Also an interesting thing about about languages versus dialects is that, for example, one variety of the Mongolian language family of Mongolic languages, Khalkh, the speakers of Khalkh, of the Khalkh variety, they have their own independent country, which is Mongolia, of course. But the other varieties, they do not have their own independent countries. They live, mostly they live in China, either in China or in Russia, and they have different levels of autonomy within these huge countries. For example, in China, there are autonomous regions, there are autonomous prefectures and autonomous counties, and in Russia, speakers of Mongolian varieties have their own republics within Russia, but they don't have their own independent countries. Okay, and so the speakers of these varieties who do not have their own independent countries are looked upon as speakers of dialects by Mongolians. Okay, so by Khalkh speakers, they are often looked upon as speakers of dialects. So the overwhelming majority of Khalkh speakers in Mongolia would say that, for example, Buryat, a variety spoken in Russia, a Mongolian variety spoken in Russia, is a dialect of the Mongolian language, and they say that there is only one Mongolian language. There is only one Mongolian language, and it has many, many dialects. But on the other hand, the Buryats typically say that we have our own language, we speak the Buryat language and not the Buryat dialect of the Mongolian language. And the Kalmyk people, the Kalmyk people's attitude is the same in this respect. They speak about the Kalmyk language. They refer to their form of speech as the Kalmyk language and not as the Kalmyk dialect of the Mongolian language. While in Inner Mongolia, for example, as I have experienced it, many people, many speakers of different Inner Mongolian dialects, let's say varieties, many of them agree with Mongolians in that their variety is only a dialect of the Mongolian language, and some even agree that their variety, their native form of the Mongolian, of their native Mongolian variety, is kind of inferior to Khalkh or to the standardized form of the Inner Mongolian Autonomous Region. Okay, we will be speaking about these varieties in more detail soon. Okay, first, well, let's go back a little bit. Okay, this area with this red boundary bordered with this red line is the core area of the Mongolic languages. So when it comes to the classification of Mongolic languages, well, there are many possible ways to classify Mongolic languages, and this classification can be based on geography or the proximity between the different varieties of Mongolian, or both. My classification it comes from a more practical approach. It geography and the proximity between these varieties also shaped my classification of these languages, but it has a more practical approach to it. Okay, it will be more clear soon. Okay, now let's look at this area. So this is what I call roughly what I call the core area of Mongolic varieties. This is the area where Mongolian is spoken by many people, and As you can see, this is subdivided into 6 areas. 6 different areas. Now let's speak about these areas in more detail. Okay, first, this is the area of Halch. So in this area, Halch is the most dominant Mongolic variety. Halch, Mongolian. Halch, the standard Mongolian language of Mongolia, the country, is based on this dialect. As you can see, some varieties spoken along the Sino-Mongolian border, spoken in the Inner Mongolian Autonomous Region, are grouped together. I treat them as varieties of Halch, because they are just so close that there are only minor differences, and we will be speaking about these varieties of Halch, so the subdivisions of Halch in a later lecture. Okay, so this is the area of Halch, linguistic dominance. Okay, now the second is area number 2 is the Oirat region, or Western Mongolian. Many refer to the Oirat variety as Western Mongolian. Number 2, spoken in Western Mongolia and in the adjacent territories along the Russo-Mongolian border in Tuva and in the Altai region, and also in northwest China, in Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, and also in Qinghai province, which is northeastern Tibet. Here we can find Oirat speakers. Of course, in China, Chinese, Mandarin Chinese is the most dominant language, and in this area, in area number 2, many other languages are also spoken. But if we speak only about Mongolic languages, then this area is the Oirat area. Okay, here I included this map too because near the Caspian Sea, the estuary of the Volga River, we have a quite small republic in Russia called the Kalmyk Republic, where the Kalmyk language is spoken, and I show you this map now because the Kalmyk is a variety of Oirat. So they are Oirats, and they too belong to the central group of Mongolic languages, together with other forms, other varieties of Oirat. But we have to use this new map because they live far away from this core area. During the 16th century, the first half of the 16th century, the Kalmyks, these Oirats, migrated from what is today Jungaria, northwestern China, across the Russian steppe and the Kazakh steppe to the estuary of the Volga River. And today they live here, and some of the Kalmyks still speak the Kalmyk variety of Mongolian. Okay, now next, area number 3 is the area where the Buryat language is spoken. The Buryats too have their own republic within Russia, but this is not the boundary of the Buryat Republic, but the boundary of the Buryat speaking area. Okay, so Buryat is spoken in Russia around the Lake Baikal and in the northern fringes of Mongolia. We can find Buryat speakers, and also in China. So this part of the area belongs to China, more precisely to the Inner Mongolian Autonomous Region within China. Alright, so this is Buryat, and number 4, number 5 and number 6 are all parts of Inner Mongolia. I subdivided Inner Mongolian into these parts because I claim that Inner Mongolian is not a single unit, because there is much diversity much linguistic diversity within Inner Mongolia. Of course, Chinese is the most dominant language, but now we speak only about Mongolic languages. So even if we speak only about the Mongolic varieties, there is a great diversity within Inner Mongolia. And number 4 is I think where the standard form of Inner Mongolian is the most dominant. Okay, the standard form of Inner Mongolian is based on the so-called Jahar dialect. So Jahar dialect, Jahar, and also another dominant dialect, Tumut, is spoken here in area number 4, and Barimja, which in Mongolian means standard. So the standard form of Inner Mongolian is predominant here. Barimja is predominant here. So this is the language of Mongolian language media here. So the TV and the language of the TV broadcast and radio broadcast is Barimja. It's predominantly Barimja here. Okay, area number 5 is the Ordos region, the so-called Ordos region. Ordos is a geographical region surrounded by the great bend of the Yellow River, and here live the Ordos Mongols, who speak their own peculiar variety, okay, variety of Mongolian, which is quite distinct from Chahar and from Harch, I think. Okay, now number 6. Number 6 is an interesting region. Now, one could argue that, well, number 6 should be number 6 and number 7, or maybe number 6, 7, and 8. Yes, but now I just lumped the varieties spoken here together into one group. I think because for practical reasons this is easier to handle this matter. Later we will be looking into this problem more deeply. But I think, the proximity between these between the varieties spoken in territory or area number 6 is quite high. So they are quite mutual intelligibility is, there is a certain amount of mutual intelligibility between these varieties. So yeah, if we split this area into 2 halves, then this would be the eastern half would be the Horchin area, where the Horchin variety of Mongolian is predominant, and the western half would be Kishiktin-Barin, the Kishiktin-Barin area. So Kishiktin and Barin are also 2 dialects, yet let's say 2 varieties of Mongolian. Kishiktin and Barin are very close to each other, so they can understand each other almost 100%. But I think also Horchin, Barin, and Kishiktin, they are quite close together. So this is the reason why I lumped them together. I like to refer to this area as the southwestern area, the southwestern group of dialects or Mongolian varieties. Okay, so these are the larger groups within the core area of Mongolic languages, the core area or central Mongolic languages. This is how I like to call them, the central Mongolic languages. And the other large group is the group of peripheral languages. Well, many scholars refer to these languages as archaic languages because they have retained a number of archaic features from earlier stages of the Mongolian language. but I disagree with this term. I refuse to use this term archaic languages, because the languages themselves are not archaic. They are spoken today, living languages today, and while it is true that they have retained many archaic features, but at the same time they have their own novelties. They are changing constantly, like every other spoken language on this earth, and they are not archaic languages, but simply they have retained some features that other languages, the languages of the core area, have not retained, but at the same time they have lost some features that the other languages have retained. Okay, so they are simply different, quite different from the languages of the core area. I don't like to call them archaic languages, but peripheral languages, because at first, as you can see from this map, they typically live quite far from the Mongolic languages, but the main thing is not the distance. Between the core territories and the place and the areas where these are spoken, but isolation. Isolation is the key word, I think, because these varieties have been isolated from the core languages, from Khalkh, from Buryat and Oirat for centuries, and they have been changing in isolation. Okay, so Khalkh, the changes that have taken place in Khalkh, in Buryat and in Oirat and in different Inner Mongolian varieties, these changes have not influenced these, typically have not influenced these varieties, or if some of these changes had some influence on them, then this influence remained quite minimal. Okay, so these are the peripheral languages. The area number one is the area of the Khamnigan language. So in the valleys in South Siberia, close to the Mongolian border, Khamnigan, really interesting Mongolic variety spoken. Okay, we will be speaking about Khamnigan more. As you can see, this is situated within the Buryat area, within the area of Buryat linguistic dominance, and naturally Khamnigan today is strongly influenced by Buryat. So many young Khamnigan people speak Buryat as their first or second language after Russian, for example, but Khamnigan is still spoken in some remote villages in the deep valleys within this territory. Alright, okay, some forms of Khamnigan are still spoken in China, and until recently some Khamnigan was spoken in Mongolia as well. I remember in 2003 in Mongolia, in northeastern Mongolia, I met an old lady. She was 88 years old and she could speak the Khamnigan dialect, but I think she was the last person who could speak Khamnigan fluently in Mongolia, and she was 88 years old in 2003, so she's most probably not alive today. Okay, second, as you can see, I have two number twos here and three small areas. So this one, okay, so in northeast China, okay, number second denotes the Dagur language. The Dagur language. Dagur Mongolian is spoken first west from the Hingan Mountains and east from the Hingan Mountains. These are two different varieties, two different Dagur communities. Mutual intelligibility is quite high, I think, between these two varieties, but they can be clearly distinguished. Okay, so the first one is called the Chichikhar Dagur because they live close to the city Chichikhar, and the next one is Hailar Dagur because they live close to the city called Hailar in China. Okay, Chichikhar is situated in the Inner Mongolian Autonomous Region, while Hailar is already in the neighboring province of Heilongjiang province in northeast China. And in the remote west we have another Dagur community, and they live so far from their cousins because in the 18th century the Qing government, the Qing dynasty, moved them from the northeast to the northwest. Okay, they were the men. The men and their families. The men were soldiers of the Qing dynasty, and they were moved here to establish military garrisons, and they remained here. And some of them still speak the Dagur language. Okay, number three. Number three is a really diverse area, linguistically diverse area. Okay, first in the northern part, which belongs to Gansu province, in the northern part, Yellow Uyghur, a Mongolic variety spoken by about 2,000, maybe 3,000 people, Yellow Uyghur. And in the middle part, in the middle section, we have a language called by the Chinese government Tu, a language and a people. So the people is referred to by the Chinese government as Tu people, and their language as the Tu language, but these people call themselves Mongol, the Mongol people, which is a distorted form of Mongol people, and they speak the Mongol language, they say. Okay, south from this area, around here, we have a county called Minhe. Okay, this in the middle section, the Mongol people live in the county Huzhu and some neighboring counties as well, but they are often referred to as the Huzhu Mongol people. Okay, south, we have a county called Minhe, and the Chinese government registers these people, these Mongolic speaking people, as Tu as well. So they speak the Tu language, and they too are the Tu people, but they call themselves Mongol, which is also Mongol is also their own pronunciation of the word Mongol, but they do not identify as Mongolians, interestingly. Okay, they say they are a separate people, the Mongol people, or sometimes they call themselves Chagam Mongol, which means white Mongolians. Okay, and also south from Minhe we have some scattered villages here in the valleys of the Repkong River, and its small tributaries, some scattered villages where different forms, really interesting forms of Mongolian are spoken. But these, the languages, the varieties of these villages and Minhe and Huzhu are mutually unintelligible, though they do not understand each other, though the Chinese government refers to all of these people as the Tu people. the two people speaking the two language. And also in this area we have the Bao'an people, and in Qinghai province, in the eastern part of this area, the southeastern part, we have the Bao'an people, the Buddhist Bao'an people, and in the western part, which belongs to Gansu province, we have the Dongxiang people, who are Muslims, typically Muslims, and also speak a Mongolic variety. Okay, so this area is really diverse linguistically, and of course, except for Mongolic varieties, we have Turkic language, Tibetan, and Sinitic languages, Chinese languages, and some Creole languages in this area. So this is a really interesting area. But if we speak only about Mongolic languages, we have a number of varieties which are mutually not intelligible. Okay, and of course these varieties spoken in area number 3 are really distant from Halch, from Inner Mongolian, from Buryat, or from Oirat. So these are really distant varieties. And last but not least, again, I have to use a different map, because speakers of this variety live far to the west, far from China and Mongolia. They live in Afghanistan. This is the map of Afghanistan. Okay, so this is China. The westernmost parts of China are visible here. Okay, so this is Afghanistan, and these people, called the Mogol people, live in Herat province of Afghanistan, and they, until quite recently, they spoke the Mongol language. Quite recently they spoke the Mongol language. They spoke their own Mongolic variety. I'm pretty convinced that this is an extinct variety. We don't have information. We don't have quite recent information about this Mongol dialect or Mongol language. Most probably it has died out, and now even young people, even children, even old people, of course young people and children do not speak Mongol, but even the oldest members of this community do not speak the Mongol language. In the 1930s, Hungarian scholar Lajos Ligeti visited this area, and he met people this time. He met people at that time, mainly elderly people, who could speak the Mongol language, but they died, and now nobody speaks. I think nobody speaks this Mongol variety. And of course, Western Afghanistan is a really difficult region to visit, to do research in this area. So we do not know much about this variety. Okay, so this is what I wanted to say for this time. Next time we will be looking at area number one within the core region of Mongolic languages, and we will be speaking about the Halch variety. The Halch variety, I will speak about the most characteristic features of this variety, and I will show you maybe a little video, and I will stop the video or the audio recording and point out the most interesting features of this variety.